Devo, this is the Global Digest think tank group. So where are you right now? What's your background?
Okay. Okay. So I'm an anti-corruption and integrity activist, but I'm also a state public servant by profession. I'm currently completing my PhD in anti-corruption, in with focus on whistleblowing policies and procedures in the South African context.
I see.
So we have a lot of instances of fraud and corruption in terms of qualification fraud, state capture commission. There was issues with the private and public sector. There was a commission that was run in 2019 that went through processes for about 5 years with high-level individuals involved in the state with the private sector. Yeah, so there's a lot of issues with procurement fraud, also supply chain management fraud, but mostly it was the State Capture Commission issues that resulted in the organization instituting some asset recovery procedures and some individuals who were delinquent directors from companies, a number of cases that have been uh, published globally in terms of the prosecution of some of the individuals that were involved in corruption.
So, you said some interesting about qualification frauds. So, do you
Yeah.
mean a university degree qualification fraud?
So a lot, there's different types of qualification frauds. You'll find that in some instances, the institutions that submit qualifications are fraudulent who are not recognized within the South African context to be in South Africa. And then the second part is where individuals claim that they do possess some degrees or diplomas or PhDs when in actual fact they do not have these qualifications. And then they are appointed in positions of power, and the institutions actually do not perform any due diligence when they are appointing these individuals into positions. So there was one case of a board member who claimed she had a PhD when in actual sense she did not have a PhD. And then South Africa, the JSE actually instituted some penalty or fines due to the fact that she claimed a PhD and when she was not a PhD graduate.
So that was exact case.
Next, we are highly regulated. So there's a number of policies and procedures that South Africa has to regulate qualifications. So we have the South African Qualifications Authority, which is similar of like a regulator that looks into accreditations of universities and professional bodies. So what happens within these institutions is that they have certain levels. There's a level till number 10 that highlights the levels of your qualifications and how you are accredited as a university. So from my point of view, because I'm a forensic investigator, then I look at the database that SAQA has to determine whether these institutions are actually accredited or not, and look at the SAQA code for that particular qualification. There's also the Department of Higher Education and Training that looks or plays an oversight role on these qualifications. So there's a number of processes where institutions were supposed to look into these databases and get this particular evidence. So for example, the story that I told you about the one lady that was found wanting in terms of qualification fraud as a PhD individual, she indicated that she obtained her PhD at Harvard University. And the Harvard University then came back and indicated that there was no such qualification from this individual. And that's the reason why the media then published the story, because we had to do investigation around her qualifications and where exactly did she get her qualification and whether Harvard actually produced this qualification to her. So you need to have a collaborative uh, process also with the universities to try and deal with the veracity of these qualifications. So this case has been publicized globally because it had a certain actors involved in this particular PhD individual.
Right. I mean, that is a clearly fraud
Yes.
certification.
So in South Africa, we are very labor intensive. So when I say labor intensive, it means that our labor relations laws comes into place. So each institution was required to ensure that they implement the labor laws. So if there is a poor performance of a particular professor, for example, who has obtained a qualification from an external organization, the institution need to be able to institute disciplinary processes for poor performance. But you need to also go through the processes of poor performance, get the person to be trained. So there's a whole process that a person has to go through to try and deal with the poor performance of the individual. But
Right.
then there's also another aspect of finding out whether the institution has provided a qualification with just because the person was maybe a political figure, etc. Because you do have certain
Right.
instances of that. Um, so it's an act. It's called PRECA. It's a Prevention of Combating or Corrupt Activities Act. And Section 34 of that act specifically states that an individual or even a person of authority can report this to law enforcement for investigation. So in instances of that, you can actually refer this matter to law enforcement, such as the South African Police Services, or we have a national prosecuting authority to deal with particular instances of investigation, because it will be a red flag. So
Right.
an individual needs to report that particular aspect to the relevant authorities.
Right.
But we do have another case that actually came out last week. There was a professor, or actually a PhD student from a very well-known institution, but the institution then found out that the individual was using ChatGPT to write his thesis. And then there was a disciplinary process that was instituted against this individual because the person clearly plagiarized in the thesis. So there was also indication where the person was banned for a number of years from actually studying in the institution or a higher institution. Yeah.
Right. So, if we talk more about those professor poor performance, the professor did not want to help during advising dissertation of student. Probably even they don't want to meet a student once a year uh, or once in 6 months or 3 months. How can you say that isn't corruption?
It is actually corruption, but in the instance of South Africa, we need to be able to institute the policies of the organization. So if this person or supervisor is from the institution, a university, uh, the university needs to take action or accountability for this particular instance. So the authority then would need to institute maybe an investigation or try and deal with with this particular aspect.
Right.
Because from our point of view, you cannot. There's no basis just to institute a disciplinary process or to institute investigation. It has to be reported for an investigation to happen.
Right. So it
Yeah.
means the student has to report if the professor
Yes.
is poor performance or
Yes.
professor unwilling to advise or helping student, or professor ignore the students.
Yes.
So your point is student must report university, or even you said even student can report to the police, something like that.
Yes, yes, to law enforcement. So we have the South African Police Services that they can report to. They also have the National Prosecuting Authority that you can report to. And there's also other institutions such as the Higher Education Department or the Public Protector that we have to investigate these cases. And in South Africa, our civil society organizations are very active. So you can also report, a student can report to civil society organizations to deal with this particular matter. In fact, last week we had an issue in our one of our universities, South African universities, where the portfolio committee. So a portfolio committee is an overseeing body for Parliament for South Africa. And some of the members of the portfolio committee raised issues around how is it that the lecturers or supervisors have been appointed who are foreign nationals instead of South African citizens. And it caused a red flag because there was a number of lecturers or supervisors that were appointed from a certain country. So it raised a number of red flags around that. And there is an investigation that is currently happening. There was a whistleblower actually reported that particular aspect of appointing supervisors that were not necessarily supposed to be lecturing within the South African universities.
Right. I mean, if it's a foreign supervisor or domestic supervisor, as long as they are good quality and good performance, that will be not be case if they are poor performance, either domestic or foreign supervisor. It will be, as you said, red flag, a big issue, if poor performance.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's the thing. And when you said it's about reporting police agency or the university disciplining committee or any higher education ministry of education, something like that. So maybe
Yes.
some cases, uh, even Ministry of Education, they might be not willing to investigate, because professor have a strong network, professor
Mm,
network, a lot of professor, clubs, or those a kind of a group, professor group. They have strong, they are protecting each other. Any professor, even they know mistake, they are covering. So that is very challenging.
Yeah, it is a concern because if you look at our history as South Africa, a lot of whistleblowers were assassinated also um, through the reporting of corruption. Investigators have also been killed
Right,
when they were investigating this particular aspect. So it's a very dangerous environment that we are living in, and yeah, it's quite difficult, but. If we're trying to drive ethics and because I'm an advocate for ethics and integrity,
right,
you need to pull through. You need to be able to be an ethical investigator and ensure that when you are developing these investigation reports or even performing your investigations, you need to do it properly. You need to do it with due diligence. Do not take in any kickbacks. There are bribery claims. There are also, kickbacks in relation to this to report on a certain way instead of another way. Um, yeah, it has been a real issue in South Africa because even auditors have been involved in this particular aspect, misreporting or misstatements in reports, etc. So. Yeah, it's a very challenging. At this moment in time, I do not have an answer for you because we are still trying to address the key issue with our state capture commission issue that we had with South Africa is that There were a number of role players involved, from political leaders
right,
to universities, to auditors, investigators, professional bodies. So there was a lot of actors involved in this, and we're still trying to address this key issue of
right. So,
prosecution dealing
right.
with this.
So
Yeah.
you have to very cleverly or carefully to investigate, and
Yeah.
also sometimes it's risky and danger, as you said, they can
Yeah.
assassinate
Yes.
because in some those very powerful professor or
Yeah.
a
Mm.
group of professor powerful
Mm.
can make you trouble, investigate,
Yeah.
then get
Yeah.
back trouble. If they
Yeah.
then
No,
you should also prepare, you have to be strong and
yes, you have to.
your investigation commission or your group should be also be strong, prepare. How did you prepare? How did you strong enough?
As an individual, I think I am strong enough to be ethical in my duties. Wherever I see red flags, I report it. Yeah, so I think it's on an individual basis. You would know as an individual whether you want to take on this particular aspect or not.
Right.
Yeah, it's individual based. Yeah.
Right. So when you talk about professor corruption, those professor maybe because there are many reasons they did not willing or they are poor performance, but they are also engaging another business, so they
Yeah.
cannot concentrate on their student because they get other extra money,
Yeah, so basically it's sextortion. It's called sextortion in South Africa, where you pay for sexual favors. But it's actually happening not only within the universities, it's actually happening everywhere in any
Right,
organization where you want a position. So when you investigate it, then you need to investigate it in terms of the company policies, the state policies in terms of how it is regulated. So basically, we have a number of anti-corruption laws. We look at the Prevention or Combating of Corrupt Activities Act. We look at the Criminal Procedures Act to deal with certain aspects of sextortion.
right,
But most of the time, we rely on individuals to come forward to report these particular instances because this is something that we may not know
right,
as investigators. So you need to have a report coming out where individual says that, you know what, there was an individual that was who actually was involved in sexual corruption or sextortion, and therefore we are reporting this particular aspect. And when you're reporting, individuals need to have evidence in relation to this particular allegation, or else investigation may not happen because there's no evidence to substantiate this particular allegation.
right. So in that sextortion case, the victim who are not engaged in sexual favorism. So
Mm.
professor ignore them or not help the student. So the victim is who are not engaged in corruption or sexual
Mm.
favorism.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so it's actually, if we are to investigate it, we still need to have a basis of investigating it. It's going to be very difficult to just go and investigate any individual based on just some allegations. So in South Africa, we are very regulated, so we cannot just go in, investigate individuals. We need to have proper processes, be mandated to investigate this particular aspects. So if individuals, like for example, if an organization has a policy, a whistleblowing policy that highlights if there's any instances of sextortion, or if there's any wrongdoing that you have come across, please report it through this hotlines. So this is the way you'll be able to look into these actions and then investigate these particular actions.
right. right? So professor should equally teach them. So there are unequal practice. How do you see that?
Yeah, no, there will definitely be unequal processes or so with the universities, I think it's because university is regarded as an organization. The organization then needs to take into into consideration the processes of how do you appoint supervisors? How do you go through the appointment processes? Are there proper uh, quarterly reporting to determine whether there's progress in how the supervisor and the student are performing their duties? Um, but it's left to the organization, to the university, to actually take the necessary action if they feel that there's some issues of corruption or poor performance, etc., within the organization.
Right. So as student can approach university. If university are not doing very well, then student can go to Ministry of Education or
And then
even
and law
even
enforcement.
police. You said
Yes,
even
law
police.
enforcement, law enforcement, or even civil society organizations, depending on the country that you are in. So, for example, when I mentioned that South Africa has a very, very active citizenry, our civil society organizations are actually doing a lot of work in society to try and address corruption. So, civil society organizations, some of our big names have really brought in a number of cases to success. So yeah, so there's a number of protocols that you can use as an individual. Your first line, but however, should be the institution, because the institution needs to be able to put in proper processes to detect if there's any fraudulent activity or corrupt activity within the organization. That is the
Right.
first line of defense. Because for corruption, there needs to be a number of people involved in dealing with corruption. So, in instances of that, you can report it anonymously to try and protect yourself. And you need to also do a background, because you need to be able to understand how many people are actually involved in this particular aspect. Because you can find a situation that even the SAPs may be involved, or the higher education institution could be involved.
Right.
So your best bet would be to go to a civil society organization and report this, but anonymously. And protection needs to be given to you as an individual, because you could be retaliated against.
Yeah. So my point is those supporting corrupt professor by other a group of professor. So those other a group of professor also, can you say, involved in corruption, or well, can you measure a punishment to other professor too?
No, I think you need to then be able to do investigation on that particular aspect and see the role played between each individual to determine the sanctioning or the investigation processes. Because you can have the main leader of the particular corruption, but then also individuals who may not have done the corruption but who have assisted
Right.
in this particular aspect. So, in terms of that, we have particular laws that provide certain sanctioning processes in terms of the roles played between the corruptor and the corruptee aspects of it.
So it means your
Yeah.
point is the action, the punishment will go to the main, the direct corrupted professor.
Yeah.
The other
Yes.
professor may be uh, not directly related, so
Not direct.
it may be
Mm.
another issue, right? Because of,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe professor friends or colleagues or who are standing behind him, but that is another process. Is
Yeah, it's another process. But also, in terms of, like, for example, unethical or ethics. is not regulated in our country. However, it's basically you can have instances where an action can be legal but unethical at the same time. So the investigator needs to be able to determine, is this particular action of this person, is it unethical conduct or is it corrupt actions?
Right.
So you need to be able to differentiate between the two, because in certain instances, unethical conduct is really not disciplined
I
in
see.
our institutions. Yeah.
You can comment that is unethical, right?
Yes, yes,
But
unethical.
it is not yet corrupted, not
Corrupt.
not
Yes.
not punishable yet. So
Yes,
it's the
yes.
thing. So that's we talk mainly about Professor corruption case because there are many corrupt cases as you said,
Many.
but today we are only talking about Professor corruption, and and then those university. Do you recommend the university should have student human right hotline, human right hotline, or any help being student hotline, any etc. in the university? What kind of uh, those prevention or protection corruption can available in university or in the campus?
Okay. Okay, from the South African context, we have the student representative councils that needs to be instituted within universities. And the student representative councils actually are consisting of students
Right,
to take on the any action that needs to be done for a particular university. So there is an element where the individual can report to the student representative council to try and address that particular aspect. But we also have the Protected Disclosures Act and many other laws where it allows that each institution needs to ensure that there are whistleblowing procedures within the
right,
organization through either a hotline, or you can report it via manually, or you can have it face to face. But organizations, universities should ensure that there are processes for reporting such allegations of fraud and corruption within the
right.
organization.
So
Yeah.
those hotlines should be independent operated, right? Not like the student union should not be directly selected by professor himself.
Yeah, no, it's actually best practice that need to be, the hotline should be managed independently. So it leaves it to the organizations to either go outside of a hotline or keep in a hotline within the organization. And that's the reason why as South Africa, we experience a number of retaliation